Good afternoon. We have the advantage of being right after lunch, so I know you all are full but ready to listen. And I am Shani Carruthers, and I am the Vice President of Advocacy at Getting Smart. At Getting Smart, we are uber focused on really imagining what the future looks like for students, what's coming next, what pathways feel most appropriate for them to help them to determine their next best step. And the topic that we're talking about today, verifying skill competencies for non-traditional learning paths, is really personal for me as a mother of a son who is on this journey right now. I'm experiencing exactly what learners are experiencing every day in school. So, welcome to my TED Talk about my son. No, okay, we'll have some friends talk with us too, but the path for students beyond high school looks different for everyone, and students know it, right? And this was not just, oh, the pandemic happened, and so now students want something different. No, students have been wanting something different for a while, and now that we're kind of caught up to their desires, they realize that college may not be the best option for them, that there's so many different opportunities out there. However, they also still think that employers want them to go to college. So while a large majority say, maybe not, a large majority are still going. And then a lot of employers are saying, you know, skills-based hiring is really the way to go, but I'm still going to kind of lean toward those students with a degree because it's the less riskier option. So how can we begin to close these gaps? And we have a great group of panelists here for us to walk through this, but how can we begin to close these gaps so that we truly understand what are great signals of quality learning for students? What does that look like beyond the degree? Because that A on a transcript literally tells us nothing. So what competencies are students truly experiencing in mastery, and how can we best help them to tell their stories? So, again, I'm joined by some distinguished guests here on the stage with me. Tim Taylor from, I went away from my mic. Tim Taylor from America Succeeds. I have Amanda Winters from the National Governors Association, and they'll be able to introduce themselves as well. Scott Cheney from Credential Engine, and Shad Ahmed from Opportunity at Work. So Tim, I'm going to start with you, and I'm also going to stay really aligned to our theme for JFF. So when you introduce yourself, can you also tell us what America Succeeds is doing to eliminate some of the systemic barriers that students and other learners are facing in order to get to quality work?
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome and thank you. Pleased to be here. Thanks to ASA for hosting. America Succeeds is a Denver-based policy and advocacy organization that works at the intersection of employers and the education system. So we work on the demand side with employers that say this is what we need, and then we try to influence and put our finger on the scale as it relates to the supply side, the education system, so that more people are prepared for economic success and mobility as they move forward. Our primary project currently is around what we call durable skills, which is another word for soft skills, since soft skills is a terrible term for those skills, but it's how you use what you know, critical thinking, collaboration, and then how you show up, so things like leadership, metacognition. We can dig more into sort of the definitions and why we distinguish between durable skills and soft skills. The answer to the question as it's creating pathways is that according to research that we've done, we looked at 80 million job descriptions. We looked at 80 million job descriptions from employers across the country. And what we found is that 7 of the top 10 most in-demand skills from employers are these durable skills. Everybody is, sort of nods, and this is motherhood and apple pie. But we know that if you don't have these skills, you have no shot at creating a career pathway for yourself, for your family, getting to a sustainable wage. I'm done.
It's like it's
Who's in charge of the mic?
just one moment. Technical difficulty. I'm sure Amanda can use her teacher voice, but I also want to make sure that we can all hear you.
Yeah, give us a sec.
There we go. He got pulled off the stage like he was at the
feel like that
Eagles.
was a signal.
Yeah. Amanda.
All right, please don't do that to me. Okay, my name is Amanda Winters. I am Program Director for Post-Secondary Education at the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices. Post-secondary education means a lot of different things, and we actually shifted the name of our team when I started about 5 years ago from higher education to post-secondary for this specific reason, that there's multiple pathways to opportunity, things that happen after high school. What can get you to a good opportunity and a family-sustaining wage. And that's what we're interested in, no matter where that takes a learner or worker. We heard that from a governor's office who said, we don't work with higher education, we work with our community colleges. And I was like, oh, that's, okay, never mind. We're gonna just change our words, it's all right, I'm not gonna explain it to you. But it's exciting to see the opportunities that partners around this room and others at this conference especially are trying to explore around things like apprenticeship, around the whole continuum of work-based learning, which I think is drawing us a lot into this space around skills. A lot of states are committed to expanding opportunity for people to explore what could be next for them. And my biggest concern is that we do this in service to the learner and not in service to our systems or purely to employers. We need to have the most mobility skills across our systems. If students don't think they want to go to college, it shouldn't close off the path for them to go back later if they decided they wanted to, and have their skills valued. So I think this sort of validation and understanding of skills is critical to the work in state systems level, because we want to make sure that no matter what path you choose, that doesn't take you into a cul-de-sac of opportunity, where if you come back to our system, you have to start from ground zero and then try to do a new thing. But we can understand better how to value those skills across multiple pathways. So we're really excited to learn alongside folks like America Succeeds and Opportunity at Work up here who are doing some of the work on the ground to talk about these skills, and then we can figure out how to use them. And one of the things I was mentioning earlier, and then I'll shut up, you don't have to turn off the mic, is that we use degrees as proxies because proxies make things easier. So just saying something to the proxy doesn't mean it's bad. It can just be a way in which we understand groupings of things. And so I think as we move into a skills conversation, we have to start thinking about, yes, if we're going to be thinking about other ways in which to move this information around, ease of use and understanding are going to be critical to engaging with our state systems as well as the employers that are working alongside us.
Scott, I'll let you add to the conversation. Introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and I'll add my thanks to ASA for helping to organize this. So post-lunch, let me get a little audience engagement here. We're talking about kind of credentials and skills and pathways. So if we were to define for you, some of you may know the answer to this, but most of you probably don't. If we were to define a credential as everything that's in the marketplace that signifies what you've earned through education and training. So a high school diploma, a certificate, an apprenticeship, a certification, a license, a degree of any type and any level. How many do you think are available in the United States right now? Okay, some of you knew the answer. Thanks for reading our website or our reports, I do appreciate that. For those of you who didn't hear, it's over 1 million. How many different organizations do you think provide those credentials in the United States? Yeah, you didn't read far enough in the report. It's on page 7. Nearly 60,000. So imagine if you're a young person or anyone else trying to make sense of what do I do and where do I go other than that easy to know proxy that we've all talked about for forever at college. How do I make sense of that? So our job at Credential Engine is to have as much information as you need about all of those providers, all of those credentials, all of the skills, all of the quality metrics, all of the connections to job requirements, all of that be fully open and usable on the web. Now the easiest analogy is, let's say there were 1 million hotels in New Orleans. and you were coming to New Orleans and you had to sort through 1 million hotels. Well, you could do it through Yellow Pages or talking to Aunt Minnie, who came here 20 years ago and kind of remember that she stayed someplace, or you can pull up Expedia and Hotels.com and Travelocity and all these other tools that help you navigate all of that information. We're building the kind of infrastructure behind education and training that is behind Expedia and Travelocity. And to give you one more example of the kind of work we're doing to meet this 75 million, let's say that you're driving to the airport and you've mapped out your perfect drive to the airport, fastest way to get there to get your plane. You get on the freeway and all of a sudden there's an accident 5 miles down the road. And you don't know it, but Waze does. And Waze can tell you, here are 5 different ways to kind of go around that accident to still get you to the airport on time. If you have all this information available, you can actually have a Waze for education and training. So that you can actually give people an idea of, hey, COVID hit, the job you wanted doesn't exist anymore. What are my alternative pathways to get to a job I want that doesn't have to require college, but can look at all of those credentials and all of those quality skills to still get you to a successful place? That's possible with new kind of change the data infrastructure behind all of this. So that's what we're trying to do to be part of this North Star.
Great. And Sean, and Scott has given us a generational journey from Yellow Pages to Waze.
Right? Anyone want to raise your hand for Yellow Pages?
There you go.
Anyone have an Ant-Man? Forget about it.
We have some Yellow Page fans in the room, but if you can tell us how opportunity at work is contributing to this conversation.
Won't be able to follow that, but I'll give you data. So at Opportunity at Work, we're focused on the 70 million workers in America who are skilled through alternative routes. These are workers who have completed high school but do not have a 4-year college degree. They picked up their skills in the ways that all of us pick up our skills on the job, through short-term credentials, through community college, military service. And we're doing this in 3 ways. We are focused on data-driven narrative, so the Tear the Paper Ceiling campaign, some of you might have seen with the Ad Council. What we found is when hiring managers understand that more than half the working population doesn't have a 4-year degree, their hiring practices change. Unfortunately, that number is about 30% who actually understand the proportion of workers in the labor market who do not have a degree for good middle wage jobs. The second part is through data-driven action. So how do we get not just degree requirements removed, but help build the infrastructure so we get through the chicken-egg challenge of how do we move to a skills-first labor market. At the same time, we know individual actions can go a long way. And so we're working with governors to tear the paper ceiling or large companies to have a demonstration effect. We're hoping to send the signals that this can and should be done. And then lastly, through data-driven learning. We know that of those 70 million stars, 30 million have skills for jobs that pay at least 50% higher on average. Think about that. That means the labor market is not working. It's not clearing. It's not finding those people with skills, and that includes durable skills, it includes technical skills, and so that there's a matching problem. And so how do we use technology and infrastructure to close that matching gap? And so again, we're on this journey. We have to approach it with humility, but we got to get going on it. And so that our focus is to be a catalyst alongside many partners to push towards that skills-first labor market.
So now that we've done this foundation, we've done the formal introductions, we're going to pretend like there's no one else in the room, and we're just going to have a very organic conversation about verifying skill competencies, because that's what I want this to be. And Tim, we're going to start with you, because a couple of the attendees or participants have mentioned things around hiring practices, and you mentioned when you were doing your introduction about durable skills. So can you define that a little bit further around what durable skills are and how hiring practices have changed and where we need to continue to go based on the work that you're doing at America Succeeds?
Sure, thanks. So a little bit more on the definition of durable skills. What we did is we crosswalked and mapped everything that you may be familiar with as 21st century skills or soft skills or essential skills or any of those things to see what different folks use in terms. But generally, how you use what you know, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, and then those other things about how you show up, the leadership, the metacognition, the lifelong learning. we came up with the term durable skills because employers kept coming to us and saying, these skills last a lifetime. As you move from job to job, you will take these skills with you, even if you don't take all of the technical skills. And in our organization, as America Succeeds, we were trying to bring the business community back into the conversation about what educators need to do to make sure students have these skills, and when they get to the workforce that they have and can demonstrate those skills. So durable skills was the stickiest term that we've come up with, that we were able to come up with, that really brought those employers back in. And really, they're not soft. We're 23 years in the 21st century. We think it's a better term all the way around, so I'll put in a plug for durable skills. Why it's so important is because the demand for these skills is growing. I mentioned that we looked at 80 million job descriptions and found that 7 of the top 10. Earlier this month, the World Economic Forum just released a report, and they said 9 of the top 10. To some degree, you can look at what's happening with ChatGPT and AI and some of the other things, which 2 years ago when we were doing this was just still, right, this idea that a handful of people knew about. For higher skill, higher wage jobs, they require more durable skills. Low skill, low wage jobs, look for if you can lift a 40-pound box. So if we're trying to really prepare the workforce of the future, and we have AI bursting onto the scene, these are still the essential human skills that folks are going to have to be able to do that so far AI can't quite compete with. So as we're looking for the jobs of the future and to make sure kids have the types of things that they need to be ready for, both on the technical side and on the durable skills side, these are essential across the board. It doesn't matter what industry, what geography, or whatever education level you have, no durable skills, no job. So the folks who just don't want their kids to come home and live on their couch in their basement, these are the types of things we have to ensure happen. So and what's happening, as an example, I'll give you one. So 11 states have now removed the 4-year degree requirement from hiring for their jobs in their state. Georgia's been the most honest in saying that the reason that they're doing it is because they had 25% turnover last year in their state jobs. And at 25% turnover with a tightening labor market, they just had to remove, right? These states are having to remove. I'd love to think it was for equity and increased mobility and all the things we would love for that to reflect, but it's not. It's just they need people. They need people in there. And as there's more opportunity around learning and employment records, and there's the exploding world of credentials that are out there, there's more and more opportunity to demonstrate that you have some technical skills. But every employer out there hires for a combination of technical skills and a combination of durable skills in their candidates. And the one thing we don't have are great ways to evaluate those durable skills, and the 4-year degree has been the proxy for those durable skills. It meant you made it through. It meant you had the persistence to get through. They know you probably did some type of collaboration. So what we're facing, and private employers are doing this as well, but in the workforce, this is a really unique moment in time and opportunity for us to make sure that there are ways to validate and be equitable around validating those types of skills and make sure that more students have access and opportunity to increasing economic mobility.
I want to go back to that validation, Scott. I see you about to raise your mic, so I'm coming to you.
Well, the reality is that as more providers of credentials know that the durable skills are essential, they're going to claim that they're in there. Right? I mean, providers are really good about saying, of course we offer what you need. But when you actually look at the connection, I forget who did this research a few years ago, the providers, like 90% of them said, of course we're providing exactly what the economy needs and what employers need. And employers said, about 40%, we're not getting what we need. And so the providers and employers have different languages. And we've got to have, and it happens in the degree level, less so, but where we have these other credentials in the marketplace, we all have to do a better job of making sure that we're helping them accurately describe the skills and competencies that are being delivered, and then accurately measure that people are actually learning them. Because you may offer it, but the person doesn't get it, and they still walk out with a credential saying, I completed, but it's not actually translating into. So, I mean, those are hard to do at the degree level. They're even harder to do at the sub-degree level, where you don't have the kind of infrastructure necessary to actually map the credentials, stay on top of them. So it's a collective effort, but if this is going to happen, we've got to not only get the accurate accounting for what's being delivered in those 10-week credentials, the certificate, the badges, and all these other things, but then it has to be usable by folks over here so that the employers can actually see it and read it and know that, yes, I'm getting that from this candidate who may not have a degree. And that's a ton of what Amanda's working on around LERs, but it's also what you're really focused on and making sure that you've got the signals being translated between what I know without a degree and what you need to hire me.
Yeah, a couple of things I'll throw in to add on that are challenges. First of all, we in the education and policy space have a tendency of saying, well, industry is telling us what they need, and then for some reason they're not getting what they need. Industry does not speak with a clear voice. There's lots of different industry voices that are coming to our education and training providers and saying what they need, and totally agree, they speak different languages. So they might be thinking that they're telling us consistently what they need, and then we create things and they're like, wow, we're not getting what we need. And so it's just this back and forth of frustration, and the people who are missing out here are the learners who we're trying to send through in good faith to get to that job on the other side. So the challenges of language are real. And then the challenges of quality. As we're talking about those million credentials, there are a lot that are offered by our public or our higher ed systems in states. But there's a lot of stuff that's in like industry related groups, or it's coming from third parties, some of which we know and we understand what their quality frameworks are, and others are new and emerging, and some of these are meaningless and useless, and some of these actually can, if you have validated learning them, get you to a next step. But I do think the quality conversation when it comes to states, like, what are we going to fund people to do? Like, what is our aid going to go from our workforce boards and from our, maybe if we have a short-term credential scholarship, what are we going to fund? And so those are some of the conversations around quality that I do think the conversation around some of these foundational skills is key to if we're trying to prepare people for college and career readiness metrics, or if we're trying to prepare people for, maximum mobility across jobs, so some of these cross-cutting skills, where's the place to invest? And so understanding how we can have an overarching conversation around quality when we're talking about skill validation is going to be critical to state engagement, because they're thinking about data collection, money, and employment outcomes.
And I want to stay on this notion for quality, so thanks for serving today. And Sean, I want to come to you because the quality is important in order to minimize the risk. And so how do we help employers and students to see the quality of programs? What does that look like? How are you all helping to kind of make that more transparent?
Yeah, one thing to just, when we talk to employers, one of the things we come back at them and they're like, oh, we need this idea of risk, right? So the HR teams, their whole job, they're trained to to manage risk, right? The legal departments are trained to manage risk. And what we're trying to do is de-risk this idea, right? Why does it need to feel risky to hire someone without a degree? And then when we start to feel like there are all these smoke screens that employers are throwing up. So we say, well, once you pass the degree screen for someone with a degree, well, are you verifying their skills? How are you doing that for people with degrees? And so what I want to do in this conversation is be careful not to fall into the trap, because employers actually don't know what they want when it comes to this collectively or individually. But how do we take bite size and work through it? So when we look at software developers, right, where there's been a labor shortage in that space, today we have over 30 technologies that are verifying skills in software development with different coding languages, and we have many stars who are getting into those jobs. And so the question is, well, what would it take for other areas and other job families to have that type of push? And I think with generative AI, we actually have an opportunity to flip it around to be useful there. But the thing we think about a lot is, well, the demand signal has to be strong, right? So we believe in market-based solutions, right? That's the only way we're gonna get to scale. And so if employers are saying, look, we want stars in cybersecurity jobs at scale, we want stars in entry-level sales roles at scale, you better believe the market's going to respond to that, whether it's talent developers, even in some of our our experiments in certain cities where we've lined up aggregated demand from several companies that the data is out there, the discussions are out there. We've had 3 community colleges say, hey, we can build a program in 6 months to deliver on that demand if we know it's stable and consistent. And so again, how do you, for us, it's expanding demand on the demand curve side that then aligns incentives and prompts a whole bunch of other action that we can't predict or control, sitting in a room like this, but we can essentially get those signals going and firing. And I think that in turn, you get that dialogue going on what is quality, because I think everyone wants to provide, and especially community colleges and short-term training programs, but they don't see that aggregated demand and that clear signal, so they're kind of punching in the dark. And so I think the most we can do is make sure that demand is being stimulated, but clear and clearly signaled. And part of that is, how do you say you're going after stars for these jobs? And then you actually can see millions of jobs across the country, and as a result, spark a lot more innovation.
Tim, can you answer that? What is quality, or what signals quality? Because we talk about these durable skills that most of us have been using all of our lives. I mean, from the very beginning, I'm thinking of I don't know if anyone are TikTok users, but Van Van, who is this 4-year-old kind of star who has exploded because of some durable skills that she is exhibiting at the age of 4. But what does quality really look like, and what does mastery look like for those specific signals of quality that we're looking for as we think about durable skills and beyond?
You said these were going to be softballs.
Sorry.
In terms of durable skills, right, I think the definition of critical thinking is different across the board. And so one of the first things that we did is we partnered with CompTIA, who is a tech assessment company. Many of you may be familiar with them. But the first thing we had to do is create a common lexicon. So we brought together subject matter experts across a number of industries and from a number of geographies and all kinds of different hiring folks to say, let's come up with a common lexicon so that when you say technicals, or when you say creativity or whatever it is, we all understand that there is a common lexicon or a definition for those terms. The second thing is if there is a common definition for those terms, then you can assess them the same way. But the interesting debates were around things that were, so risk assessment is one of the durable skills, right? And we had somebody in the room and they represented manufacturing, and they said on the factory floor being able to assess risk is, cogs churning in a machine where you might lose your hand. But then we had an accounting firm that was there and they said, risk assessment is if you put the numbers into the wrong column and everything shifts, that's different. And we said, well, is the ability to assess that risk different, or is the application of risk assessment different? And once we started having those conversations with a common definition and the common lexicon, we actually were able to get somewhere and create a rubric about how you might assess this. I'm not sure that provides quality just just on its own, but that was necessary in order to get something where you could actually assess something where there was something valid, and employers across the board, and we've had over 800 employers weigh in on the rubric that we've created. But it's the things like that are the specific and the nuance of saying this will get to quality if we all share some of those ideas.
Scott, you want to add to that, or Amanda?
Amanda and I would both kind of do it.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I guess I want to be cautious about the use of the term quality, because we have to be focused on it, but there's so many different aspects of quality in this space. So we definitely want to make sure we're looking at programs and providers and credentials that are well designed, actually know what they're there to deliver it well, and have ways to determine whether it's actually being learned. That's a quality design that is essential to reach quality outcomes, usually, most often. But when we start thinking about quality for the impact on individuals, whether it's a short-term credential or a PhD, I oftentimes point to a community college, and it would be anyone, that is offering a certificate program. And that certificate program might be delivered through various funding streams to lots of different populations. You could have it being delivered for a long-term unemployed individual. You could have it being delivered for a job changer. It could be delivered to a high school student who's in a dual enrollment program. It could be delivered to a veteran who's on post 9/11 GI money. Same program, same credentials, same community college, very different outcomes for various reasons. It could do really well for long-term unemployed, but not be as effective in terms of labor market impact for the returning veteran because it didn't really kind of elevate them beyond what they needed before. So we just have to be really careful. So part of our job is to bring forward all of those quality metrics that cuts across the populations, the demographic and ethnic breakdowns, the region of the country it's being delivered in. Is it being delivered pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID? What are all of those factors, and put all that information out there so we can make good decisions about which credentials, which skills at the right time for the right population in the right setting are going to have the greatest outcomes. And that's not the answer everyone wants, right? You want to know, is that an A+ credential with A+ skills that's going to get me an A+ income? Well, it's not as easy as that, so you have to get all that information and then let the really good people at Opportunity at Work be able to then assess it in a context of we're trying to help these people get the jobs in these companies in this region. And that's where you get a lot more information about, is this quality in this context? So I just want to be super careful and open up our aperture about quality before we kind of make those final decisions.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to give you a space. As you're responding, I would also love for both you and Shah to build on what Scott just said, and then talk about how then do we match employers and students or learners or workers to the best open positions based on all of these things kind of working together.
Yeah, so there is huge nuance to the term quality. When you're thinking from a state perspective, first of all, it's things we can measure. Like quality is like quality outcomes. Like what is it? And then also quality of the provider as well as quality of the credential, because all of those, our state regulatory systems will be looking at those education and training providers and saying, can they provide good training and support? Do they have the adequate folks there doing this work? So there's all these elements of quality there. But I will say from a state perspective, quality is a floor. It's not an aspirational term. Quality means you are doing the basic amount that you need to do to not steal from people, essentially. It's a very consumer protection word when it comes to state work. So it's important to understand. So when we're talking about quality, say in higher education, a lot of times you're thinking about continuous improvement and accreditation. Totally different type of conversation around quality. The state conversation is very much, what do we gather data on? What can we measure? What are good outcomes? So setting those sort of thresholds for what we think, should it be the minimum amount? Like if we need credentials to get people to 10% above what a high school graduate would have. Those are the types of things we can measure and we can point to. So it's very important to understand that when we're talking about quality at a state level, it's based on the data we have, and it's based on a consumer protection sort of floor of opportunity. And we look to other partners in this space to help us think aspirationally beyond that. But that conversation, I think, is super important there. And so when we're talking about connecting people to opportunity, we're thinking about, okay, how can we get the best signals for folks? I will say in the micro-credential or like digital credential space, branding is super important. A lot of employers, we found, are not really thinking about the quality of the credential if they have an understanding of the quality of the provider. So say if a micro-credential is offered by the University of Michigan. I did not go there, so I don't have any stake in the ground here, but they're going to accept it as quality because they believe the provider is quality. So there's some differentiated conversations here around sort of those spaces, and then how can we, as state systems, in talking with our employers, better understand how to leverage some of these credentials that live outside some of those branded spaces, but still are getting people what they need. And then how do we figure out if they're getting people what they need? So I think a lot of these conversations are very regional. There's a lot of like employers' understanding of the needs of their region, of their community college or university or training partners, and what some of the pipelines are. It's hard to have that conversation many times at the state level, because there's such regionality to a conversation around skill building. But I do think some of these lexicons that are being built can help us have some of those regional conversations in a consistent way, in ways we haven't in the past. And we are certainly thinking about those states that are trying to remove degree requirements and hoping to help them think beyond that initial step to say, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get more people into jobs. And with such low unemployment numbers right now, it's a great time to be thinking about some of those populations who have been disconnected from opportunity in the past. A lot of states across the aisle are thinking about the previously incarcerated or justice-involved populations. And we're very excited to see some of the work advance in those spaces, thinking about long-term unemployed. So thinking about people who have not had access and thinking how some of these frameworks and conversations can open the door for them. So we don't just make it another path for people who are already on the path to get a job. We make some change at the end of this. And I think I don't see clear steps yet to getting all the way to that change, but I think some of the conversations happening here are the building blocks towards a changing culture when it comes to opening doors based on the skills conversation.
And Sean, that's a great transition to your paper ceilings campaign as well. And so if you could kind of share what that is doing for workers in terms of helping to connect learners to the best opportunities.
Yeah, with 50 partners last fall, we launched the Tear the Paper Ceiling campaign. It's been an exciting part of the Skills First movement in terms of how we broaden that discussion to the general public in many ways. The campaign is focused on stars and workers, so they're aware of the opportunities that are available to them and to shine a light on all the stories. There's 5 million stars in high-wage jobs today. They're proof points that you can break through the paper ceiling, but they should be the norm, not the exceptions. And then for employers broadly defined, all the different ways that employers can take action, large and small, to tear the paper ceiling, whether it's removing degree requirements on a job description. How many of you cut and pasted job descriptions and never thought about what's on them? You know, how do we be thoughtful on those pieces? And then, of course, the deeper infrastructure. How do we move to skills first and through the products and services that many in the ecosystem are creating? So it's been a really exciting piece. I think when you asked the question earlier about what does this mean for workers and for learners, and I think when we spend deep time with stars about what are the things they're trying to solve for, right? It always comes down to choice, and it comes down to just more information, because there's so much information about which credential I should get, which training program I should enroll in. It's all done informally right now, and that information is there in theory. And so if you just, based on your network and what you happen to know, you make those choices. And time is precious. If you're a working learner, where you put that finite time and effectively the return on investment, there's not enough information to make that calculation. And so you're dependent on your aunt, your cousin, your colleague who happened to do that. And so even in a given metro area, that information in theory should be there. And so I think how the skills signals around specific credentials, what employers are saying they're looking for explicitly, and publishing that and saying, look, we're looking for talent with these credentials or from these programs, that sends clear messages. And that doesn't happen enough today. Although it is happening. We see employers coming back to the same talent developers, and they're starting to see patterns in what they're doing. And so how do you get that information out so workers can make those decisions and empower them so they can make those choices? And right now it's very opaque. So again, information problem in a market that in theory, some of that information is there, and it just needs to be structured and brought to bear.
So I want to just bring this back a little bit. This is a K-12 kind of pathway conversation as well. So we're talking about as well the sophomores, juniors, seniors, thinking about what the pathway is ahead of them. And I think one of the things, I don't know how many of you are from school districts or state departments or other things, but you have an enormous ability to require better services out of the organizations you hire to deliver counseling, guidance, navigation, pathway tools. We tend to unfortunately go into some of these contract selections with low cost. And if you're going to keep getting low cost, you're going to keep getting the same kind of information and services that you've been getting for forever. And we actually have been pushing a number of our state partners to build in into their procurement processes, and I know the NGA's been doing a lot of thinking about this too, how do we change what you demand out of the companies that you're contracting with to actually have them be thinking about skills, to demand that they're able to bring skills into so they can be helping students understand pathways beyond just, hey, have you thought about going to this college down the street, or 80% of our students get accepted to that college? Like, no, that's great, but let's help you understand who this student is in front of you, where they want to go, what's the best option for them, and how you can do that through multiple alternative pathways. So be thinking about ways that you can actually change that conversation in the procurement process, because you sit in a place where you can actually make an enormous difference just in that. And we're seeing vendors who are actually beginning to change how they think about the use of data and how they think about understanding better demographic breakdowns to know how to better serve people in different regions. So just go back to thinking about, if we can get all this information out there, if we're successful at having a completely transparent, open credential marketplace, awesome. But if it's still being delivered in the same old ways to students and workers, so what? Really? And I don't want to have done all this work to map 1 million credentials to have it still be, so what? When you're trying to actually help that student who needs to think about, I don't want to go to college, I don't need to go to college, what are my options in the million plus? And how do we have, and that comes down to the counselors and the tools that are put in front of students, so you don't have to rely on my cousin, right? Cousin may be great, cousin may have gone a bad path, and they just want to bring you along with them to be not lonely.
So we have just a few minutes left before we close out, and I want to leave with some actionable items. So in the next 5 years, what substantial difference can we make on this subject? So Sean, I'm going to start with you, and I want you to answer from the perspective of what do employers need to do next? Scott, what do learners need to do next? Amanda, what do policymakers need to do next? And then Tim, what do non-degree program providers need to do next? So about less than a minute for each of you.
I think for employers, just get going and start learning, and don't be overwhelmed by like trying to remove degree requirements on all your jobs and stressing that your workday system can't be skills-based yet in the way you want. Get going, small pilots, learn, and source. Just go where the stars are. So you have a campus recruiting strategy, companies know how to do that. Have a STARS recruiting strategy. Go to the origin jobs that STARS are in, go to the community college programs you know they're sitting, and you'll learn a lot in the process and learn about your requirements and what's working, what's not, on credentials and skills.
I think I may have been given the hardest one. It's easy to put a lot of platitudes out there, but you put yourself in the seat of a 17 or an 18-year-old and ask them to, really advocate for themselves. I mean, ultimately, what we need to be able to have students be able to do is to say, give me some proof of what I've learned, right? Don't just tell me I have that diploma, but list out every one of the skills that's in there that can be verified. If you have a summer internship, ask that employer who just gave you that internship to document what it is I did for you in a way that I can then take and show those skills in a way that the next employer is going to trust. Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you did there. That's easy for me to say here, so we then need to turn for the student to ensure that those things are happening for them in ways that benefit them, and then slowly teach them that as you're going into freshman year, we're doing financial literacy, we should be actually having kind of skill literacy and helping people know how to advocate for themselves in verifiable ways from all the experiences they're having. I think I just coined skill literacy.
I was here for that. Okay, so policymakers, just a few things I would throw out there. First of all, this can't be a new, shiny, separate initiative that states do. It has to change the way we talk about our education and workforce systems, or it doesn't really matter. Also, this is not a tech problem. This is a human problem. And so we have a tendency to think about, oh, we'll do this new tech thing. Like I'm doing all this work on learning employment records, and what I try to tell a lot of people is, this is all the same stuff we're talking about, but now we put a technology hat on it, and we pretend it's different. But really it's the same conversations we're having about moving people through pathways and increasing access and economic mobility. So we have to really focus on that. We have to focus on the people that we're trying to serve, and we have to invest in the data that's actually going to tell us what's working and what's not. So investments in data need to increase. The human problems need to be addressed and not just, let's bring off on a shiny thing that sits around for a couple of years and with a change in administration goes away. So, and if this is going to change the way we're talking about our pathways, it needs to change them from the short-term credentials or the pathways from K-12 all the way up into our degree programs. Or it's just going to create a bifurcated system where we have skills-focused folks and then the regular degree pathway people. And those are the things I'm anxious to avoid at some of these early stages of design.
Tim, I'll let you close it out.
Before I don't answer the question I was asked, I'm going to say this.
Love that.
I'm going to pick up where Scott left off on the educator side and the durable skills. This is not part of the current public education system where we teach and embed durable skills. And so one of the most important things is to make sure that students are learning these skills throughout their education experience. And to be explicit about it, there are not durable skills classes. You don't go and do critical thinking from 11 to 11:45 and then go to math. This is, you think critically throughout the day, you collaborate throughout the day, you learn leadership skills throughout the day, and we have to make sure that more students are having access to that, not just the students who are getting this in extra or co-curricular activities, which are largely the students that have means. So if we're really going to create some equity and opportunity for more people, what we have to do is make sure that those learners have access to these durable skills throughout their day and throughout their K-12 experience.
All right, well, a huge thank you to our entire panel, a huge thank you to ASA for helping us to put this on today. If you would like any further information, please feel free to chat with any of us after this session. In person is better, you will not find them in the yellow pages. But thank you for being with us today.